I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, today we continue with Plant-Based Telehealth Week. It's week 3, and to introduce today's wonderful doctor who does telehealth consultations, we have the co-founder of Plant-Based Telehealth. Please welcome back Dr. Lori Marvis. Thanks for doing this and introducing me to all your wonderful doctors.
Well, thank you for having me. We're always excited to be a part of your show, and it's just an honor to be here.
Yeah, I didn't notice this at first, but I love that you guys have like your own outfits. You got, I can see that Dr. Pierce has and has one, and I just thought that, I think it looks so cool. But before you introduce today's Dr. Marvis, if you wouldn't mind answering this question from Diane, who says, Dr. Marvis, I would like to have an appointment with you, which is great because Dr. Marvis is like every state in the United States, plus Washington, D.C. Would it be beneficial to send my current lab work to you in advance? And if so, how would I do this?
Absolutely. Thank you, Diane. I'm honored that you'd even consider an appointment with me, first of all. And yes, it's always very helpful before any appointment that any of our doctors have that information. So the first step would be go to plantbasedtelehealth.com. You would request a portal registration. And then we send you that invitation. You basically register, and there's places there you can upload documents as long as they're in a PDF format. And then I will have access to that. And you can also send messages via the portal, and anything else that you have questions before the appointment. There's extensive questionnaires that we ask that you fill out. So we have a lot of information before the appointment. So that's always very helpful. And thanks for thinking about it.
And so I imagine that would be the same process, whatever doctor someone would choose.
Absolutely, 100%. Everybody has the same questionnaire sent out, and it's the same process, and it's very, very helpful. And it makes your appointment time that much more productive.
That is so cool. I was thinking, because you had Dr. Clapper on yesterday, and he went to medical school a lot longer than you did. Do you think you're teaching this now in medical school? Because like telehealth it's a thing now, especially since the pandemic. And I wonder now if medical schools are doing courses teaching doctors how to do this.
I was in medical school in the 90s and early 2000s in residency, and they were doing telemedicine even in rural Texas back then. So this has been around, but not as easy to access for the general public. And it certainly takes different shapes or forms. But, I certainly think that medical students will have been exposed to it. My own daughter, who graduated medical school in May, was definitely exposed to it, even outside of my experience. So yes, I do believe they are getting that training.
I love it. I love the whole thing. Great. Well, who do you have for us today, Dr. Marvis?
Well, today I really, really always enjoy talking to Dr. Jeff Pierce because he is a sweetheart, but he's super smart. He's licensed in California, Florida, and Texas. He speaks Spanish. He can't, which is fantastic. But he's also practiced internationally, but he also takes care of high-risk pregnancies. And so our family practice doctor, who's traveled internationally, speaks different languages. What more can I say? But we have some really awesome people on plant-based health, and Dr. Jeff Pierce is one of them. And I can't wait to hear your conversation.
Yeah, great. Well, welcome, Dr. Pierce. You were on the show before, but really for a different reason. And today you're going to talk a little bit, I know, about food, which is why I wore my broccoli shirt. And also if there's anything in your telehealth appointments that you like to specialize in, or maybe want to tell people like if they have this certain, because it's kind of weird, but different doctors kind of like different diseases. You know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay, Chef AJ?
Perfectly. Love the jacket, though. That's beautiful.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having us on this week and for having me on today. And yes, I am happy to see people who are living in California, Texas, and Florida. And I love talking to people about anything, whether they're coming and just brand new to this and want to see how switching their diet and daily movement can help with health, or if they've been eating this way for a long time and they just want to try one thing or another. So happy to talk with people pretty much like we all are, just about anything. And if I ever feel like, oh man, what you're bringing to me, I know one of our other docs on the staff is super good at this, then we'll be straightforward with you and say maybe you should check out Dr. So-and-so. Because we try to refer within our group to where our strengths are.
That makes sense. Great. Do you guys see each other as patients? And if so, you actually all are in different cities pretty much, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think so. I think, someone sees Lori and someone, et cetera, et cetera. I have not done that yet, but I think it's a great idea. And I have friends and family members who I'm like, oh, I wonder, I bet you they'll be a great fit with, Dr. Miller and stuff like that.
Nice. Well, you're going to talk. So do you grow all your own food?
It's the topic of today. We grow a lot of our own food here, but certainly still go to the store and still, get bulk deliveries of this and that. But we try to grow a lot of our own stuff. And if I may, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and we'll start talking about the presentation today. All right. Okay, how's that coming through? Okay.
Looks beautiful.
Okay, so this is a presentation really where I am talking about how growing growing our own food can help us live longer, live healthier, live happier. And it's going to be full of photos from our garden here in Northern California. And I realize there's the sort of the situation where you are showing your slides from your summer vacation, and about 2 hours in, everyone's asleep except for the person who's showing the slides, right? So I want to make sure that this is both entertaining for me, it really was as I put it together, but then really informative for you folks as well. And I'm going to be, I guess I should start with a caveat to say I'm showing a lot of beautiful photos of our produce and our flowers, etc. But I had about 7 years of our garden to pick from, of garden photos to pick from. And so while I won't be showing you the little wimpy, scraggly things that died a week after I planted them, or a tomato that was eaten by a rat or a squirrel, just know that there's plenty of those that didn't make it to this slide presentation. Okay, so I think the reason why this ties in so nicely is that this is a week with plant-based telehealth docs, and we're talking about lifestyle medicine and the benefits of eating predominantly plants and moving naturally, and working with stress, sleeping well, having ties to community, having a sense of purpose, and all of these can be tied into growing your own food. And I think another nice tie-in is with the work of Dan Buettner and his group of scientists and docs in the Blue Zones project that most people who are watching this already know about. But for those that don't, Dan Buettner from the National Geographic and his group found 5 places around the world, in Sardinia, Italy, and Icaria, Greece, and Nicoya, Costa Rica, and Okinawa, Japan, and in Southern California, not too far from us, the Adventists, Seventh-day Adventist group in Loma Linda. And these 5 areas had the healthiest groups of octogenarians, nonagenarians, centenarians, and he looked for commonalities. And he said, wow, well, if about 20% of our longevity is based on our genes, the other 80% seems to be lifestyle related, and what we unlock by our lifestyles, how we eat and move every day. And so one thing that they have in common is that they all eat lots of plants. 90% of their diet is plant-based in general. And that's a almost complete flip from what we eat, which is about 55% processed foods where all the good stuff is taken out. Typically, about 33% of the standard American diet is meat and dairy products. And that leaves about 10-15%, which is plant foods, but that includes the potatoes that are French fries and the tomatoes that are ketchup, which are big sources of vegetables in this country. So how can we eat closer to what these groups are doing in the Blue Zones? How can we live closer to them? And one way is gardening, which they all have in common as well. Okay, so that's my little intro to this, and we're going to move on to our garden here in Northern California. And this is taken in 2014 when we first moved in, and that's my lovely wife Mimi in the back, who is about 9 months pregnant, and is pulling extra blackberry brambles that have overtaken the yard. And you can see that this is, maybe a little bit larger than a typical city yard, but it's not acreage or anything like that. It's just a decent sized lot. And after 3 years, this I think was taken in 2017, you can see how it's transformed a bit. We spent lots of time buying and growing plants and fruit bushes and fruit trees that we'll see in more detail. And then how it is now, this was taken just the other day, and you can see how it's looking more like a forest. The fruit trees and vegetation in general has gotten a lot bigger. We've let things go a little bit more wild to have more wildflowers for the pollinators. So this is to show that you can start off with a very blank slate. Here's a side view and how it looks now. That corner back there, how it's covered now with grapes and still some blackberries, but other annuals. Back in 2014, we started off with 4 garden beds, which was nice. It's a nice technique to use if your soil is very full of clay like ours is, but it works also if your soil is too rocky or too sandy, or there's heavy metal contamination from it being a prior work site or something like that. But then we moved that around, and now today, or maybe recently, it looks more like this. And this is the same exact view, but it's hardly recognizable based on what's growing up now. This is a look back at our house from the back little patio cement bed there. And this is how it looked the other day. And you can see that it's just full of fruit trees, and we will be in herbs that you can make teas out of, etc. And we'll be talking about why growing these things is good for your health. Okay, and it's important to say, I mean, even though I'm going to be showing you all these great images and how lush the garden is, that, you know, you don't have to be good at gardening for gardening to be good for you. And I didn't make up that quote, but it is so true. And we have found out, as we've made all of our foibles, our mistakes, we've also learned that the best gardeners are the ones that have just been doing it long enough to make the most mistakes and kill the most plants. One more view from 2014, which was just a little pull out off of the garage, and we converted it into a passive solar greenhouse, and that's how it looks more recently, and how that greenhouse looks on the inside. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can use things like greenhouses, but also just putting a row cover or a plastic or a towel or stuff to survive some of these frosts and grow some things that maybe you couldn't grow otherwise. And it all started off with our first purchase of plants back in 2014. That's one of our little apple trees on the far right that we bought, and now has been giving us apples for several years. Okay, so let's talk about the diet component. So, gardening is good for us for many reasons, but probably, well, at least one of the main reasons is because you're growing your own food that is super healthy for you. And one way that I'm going to break this down is called the G-BOMBS mnemonic from Dr. Joel Fuhrman that a lot of you folks follow. He's a very smart person who says, if you think of G-BOMBS, these are the most nutriently packed foods out there. And G is for greens. And so here we have a basket full of greens from the garden, and they're just so packed full of proteins and vitamins and anti-cancer compounds like your isothiocyanates, etc., that are going to help keep your arteries open in your heart and in your toes and everywhere in between, and to help prevent cancers and stuff like that. And the benefit of growing them in your garden is that while you might have bought a thing of kale and chard from the store 2 weeks ago, and now it's pretty wilty and soggy looking, and you're probably going to throw it out, you can just pick this 2-3 times a day directly from your garden. It's going to be as fresh as anything possible, and you don't have to worry about buying a whole bunch and it going bad. So here's the G and G bombs, and they're just beautiful too. Here's a rainbow chard with sunlight coming through it, and it reminds me of stained glass. It's just so it's both healthy to look at and healthy to eat. B is for beans, and honestly, we buy a lot of our beans in bulk because they are pretty inexpensive. That's some of the, we call it peasant food, which has kept people healthy over the millennia. But you can't buy all beans. These are some scarlet runner beans, and I should probably also say that I haven't doctored any of these photos. I haven't done any color additions or stuff like that. This is just the natural colors taken with my iPhone. So these are scarlet runner beans. They're beautiful. I'll show you what the plant looks like. But beans in general are just packed full of fiber and protein, and they help reduce diabetes risk and colon cancer risk. And so let's go ahead and grow some of these. These are a perennial, which means that you plant them as a bean like this. They grow up into a big vine. They give you beans at the end of the season. And then when the winter comes, they die down to the roots. And unless your soil is freezing hard in the spring, when things are warming up, they sprout again. And they do it over and over again. And these beans have been in the raised bed that I'll show you later for 4 or 5 years, maybe. Okay, here are some, this was one of our wimpy attempts at growing some chickpeas, but chickpeas, beans, lentils, they're all in this same family that are very healthy for you. And here's some fava beans, probably what we grow the most of. You can use them as a cover crop to feed your soil because they have nice nitrogen fixing properties, but then they also grow these great pods of healthy fava beans that you can make soups out of and patties out of, and we just steam ours and eat them like that. Okay, so moving on to O for onions and the onion family. So, I used to think that onion and garlic and leeks were just kind of stuff that you started your meal with in the saucepan to make it more flavorful. And while, yes, they do make your food more flavorful, they also have lots of compounds that are helpful for anti-cancer and blood vessel health as well. And so onions and garlic and leeks are fairly easy to grow. Here's a picture of some garlic. And you just break open a head of garlic, and you pull out the individual cloves and you plant them about an inch deep in the fall, and you water them. And they mostly take care of themselves, and you're harvesting them, depending on where you live, sometime around midsummer or so. And then you can dry them, and depending on how much you grow, you've got healthy, totally, better than organic, because you don't have to worry about the spray from the next field blowing over into your yard, most likely, and you've got enough garlic to last for a long time. M is for mushrooms. And I was just talking actually to my brother this morning about how he remembers years ago reading an article saying that mushrooms are just basically empty calories. They're, they might give you some flavor in what you eat, but it's sort of, styrofoam, et cetera. But we know a lot more about that now. And Dr. Furman mentions all the anti-cancer properties, partly thanks to the aromatase activity in them. And you can buy kits. And my wife handles the mushrooms in the family, but here are some beautiful little things that are sprouting out of the kit that we had mailed to us and are growing in our house. And then a day or two later, you can see that they're these luscious portobello mushrooms that you can then cook with over the next couple of weeks. And she's also grown shiitakes, and here's some white oyster mushrooms and some pink oyster mushrooms. The underside of a portobello mushroom, which is just gorgeous as you look at those gills, and some what they call wine cap or King Strophoria mushrooms that have grown wild in our yard. And that's our big hope, is that they really establish in the yard among the wood chips in the ground. And then you're out there trying to pick a tomato and you bump into a fresh crop of King Strophoria. And remember, these are all great for many reasons, but anti-cancer being a big one. The last B is for berries, and this is a mix of berries from our garden, and the autumn raspberries, which are delicious if you've never tried them, and there's a good chance that you haven't tried them, perhaps because they are so fragile that they don't ship well. And it's a reminder that a lot of the fruit that we have in our garden, that we have in our store shelves, are there because they have been chosen in part because how well they ship. And so, that's a major factor, for example, in the banana that is most commonly shipped around the world. It's because you can pick it really early and it will mature something like 11 days later, which gives it time to be shipped from the tropical parts of the world and semi-tropical parts of the world to the colder regions. And that's why if you've ever eaten bananas in a tropical area, you see that there's gazillions of types of bananas that are, many of which are tastier. And so this is an example with the autumn raspberries. And we know that these are good for your heart. They're full of antioxidants, your anthocyanins, and they're good for your brain and your heart and cancer risk. Here's a handful of our raspberries, of our blackberries, something that you don't see very often in stores. This is a mulberry, a Pakistani mulberry, which looks like a little finger to me. And they are just so sweet and delicious. And good for you as well. Here are some gooseberries, also not seen in stores. And this will be a recurring theme, that you have access to all of these different vitamin and mineral and micronutrient profiles in these fruits that you wouldn't normally get by just buying a Granny Smith apple at the store, for example. Here's some elderberries that we've started growing just this last year, that can be cooked down into a syrup with some immune boosting benefits, and some currants and some strawberries, and S is for seeds and G bombs. And while there are a lot of benefits in flax and chia and hemp seeds, also in which by the way, we haven't grown yet, but I'd like to try growing some flax someday, but they're so readily available in bulk. But there's also sunflower seeds that are full of vitamins and minerals, and then also pumpkin seeds, which can have iron and zinc and calcium. And this might be the same varietal, but there's a varietal called Naked Bear. I know we tried growing it once, and our friends grow it more frequently, that the seeds don't come with an outer hull, so they're easier to roast in the oven, and you can eat the flesh as well, and it's less of a hassle than cooking regular pumpkin seeds. Okay, we're going to move on a little bit to looking at the food through a daily dozen point of view. Chef AJ, we doing okay on questions and stuff right now?
Well, we do have a question, but it's more on OBGYN, so I thought I would wait till the end.
Okay, great. Yes. While we are talking about fruits of our labor right now, we can also talk about other fruits of labor a little bit later. Dr. Michael Greger has got a great site, nutritionfacts.org, and he and his team have produced this lovely free app. This is a screenshot from my phone, and he shows the 12 healthiest things to do every day, and it includes a lot of the foods that we've spoken about so far. And let's see, on the next to finish those 12 includes herbs and spices. It's pretty easy to grow herbs, a little bit harder to grow some of the spices, but doable. And we'll have some pictures of that later. Whole grains is probably what we've have dabbled in the least, because it takes a fair amount of space and a little bit more work to go from planting some wheat and harvesting it. And so we usually get that bulk, but we have tried growing some quinoa and amaranth, which has been fun to play around with. The amaranth particularly is very pretty in the garden if you haven't grown it. We don't grow our own water, but we certainly try to harvest what we can. We have rain catchment barrels that we'll show in detail, because we can't talk about all these luscious things that you grow in the garden without talking about drought right now. And exercise is going to be an integral part of growing your own food, as you'll see throughout this talk. And we also don't grow vitamin B12 plants because there aren't any, but we know that vitamin B12 comes from the bacteria in the soil, the healthy bacteria in the soil. And that's where cows get it as they're munching close to the ground and they are eating their grass, if they're lucky enough to have access to grass. But since I don't recommend eating cows, I do recommend making sure you get enough vitamin B12. And while it's a little bit romantic for me to think, well, since I don't wash my potatoes and my carrots and my turnips all that well, that I'm probably eating more B12 rich microbes than the average person, I don't depend on that as my only intake of it. And I definitely have vitamin B12 fortified foods in the house, and supplements as well. And making sure you're getting your B12 is key when you're eating a plant-based diet. And speaking of pregnancy, even pregnant women who are eating an omnivorous diet sometimes are low in B12. And another reason for pregnant women, and especially as you get older, whatever your diet is to make sure you're getting B12, because it's more common to be B12 deficient. The last way I'll break down the food aspect is through Eating the Rainbow, PCRM.org, or Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which is Neil Barnard's and team's group, is an excellent resource for all things plant-based. And they have a nice form. If you just did PCRM and Eat the Rainbow, you'd see a form that shows what the different colors of our foods, why they are important as far as, say, anti-cancer properties, etc. And looking at this cherry, which we have a couple of cherries growing in 15-gallon pots, because we're kind of running out of room for growing our trees, etc., is that it reminds me that we net them because birds can get to them. And the cherries, if I may say, do it on purpose. They want to be colorful. They want to be seen by birds and other animals that will pick them because they look luscious. They will eat them and then often poop out the seeds somewhere else. not so much humans, but birds, and will help propagate this cherry and spread its progeny all around. And so these beautiful colors are eye-catching for the birds, they're eye-catching for us, and they are often that color because of these also very healthy compounds that are in them. So here's some red cherries, but then speaking of cherry tomatoes, in this case, they are full of lycopene, which is an anti-cancer phytonutrient or plant-based nutrient that probably helps reduce prostate cancer risk. So eat your fresh tomatoes and eat them in tomato sauces that you make that aren't full of tons of oil and salt and sugar like a lot of the ones that you would buy on the counter, for example. Here's some radishes and pomegranate that we grew, and some lovely variety of peppers, hot peppers that we grew. Here are some red plums. This is a beauty plum that has, a lot of these same potent vitamins and phytochemicals in them, resveratrol being one that we'll look at a little bit. And we're moving on to orange in the rainbow, the carotenoids, of course, carrots and carotenoids, beta carotene, helpful for vision and cancer prevention nutrient there as well, but not just in carrots, but also in this gorgeous squash that you see here, pumpkin, and cantaloupe, and some healthy vitamin C, etc., in these peppers and orange jalapenos. A different set of compounds in this orange Hachia persimmon, and if you can grow persimmons where you live, which is a relatively small segment of the United States, but if you can grow it, do it, because they are delicious. And these Hachia types, which are flat on the bottom and you can be eaten like an apple, and you don't have to worry about that same astringency that you get with the fuyu types, which look more like big acorns. And unless you eat those fuyu types super soft and ripe, you'll get a sort of astringent, nasty taste in your mouth and throat. Still in orange are all these different citrus that we grow, and this is a navel orange, and our favorite citrus that we grow, which are Satsuma mandarins. And the reason why I show all the citrus, in addition to obviously the vitamin C and other compounds that are helpful for us, if you can grow them, they are helpful for filling that gap when your plums and your peaches and your nectarines and your apricots are all dormant for the winter. That's when these are really shining. And so while I don't really look forward to the winter because I'm from Southern Texas and love the heat, while I'm not looking forward to the gray and the rain and the cold, even though we do have it pretty nice up in Northern California compared to the Midwest and the Northeast, I do know that our citrus will be ripening. And even if you are in one of these colder areas, they do great in pots. And so bring it inside, grow it in a pot during the winter, and then you could always take it back outside when things warm up in spring. Here's some apricots. And then moving on to the yellow, the lemons. This is a Meyer lemon, and they're sweeter than the average type of lemon. The Meyer type, I highly recommend it. We're so lucky that we have this bush, and you can get vitamin C and other lemanoids throughout the year almost. And here's some yellow pear tomatoes and Kellogg's breakfast tomatoes with a cat hidden in the background there. And
why do they call Kellogg's breakfast tomatoes?
Yeah, I don't. It's not because they come in a Kellogg's box of breakfast cereal, but it's probably related to the Kellogg farmers back in the day. But I don't know the history well. But I know that they're an heirloom. They've been around for a long time. And for a slicing tomato that you would either just eat as a hors d'oeuvre, they also make good sort of sandwich slicing tomato, stuff like that. Onto the greens, we've got this lovely fractal broccoli, or Romanesco, which looks like something that it was done by computer or something. And it is back from the 16th century Europe. And we're getting into the broccoli family, all of the brassicas, and everything in there, including kale, which I think of Chef AJ when I think of kale. And everything in that family is just so good for us that it's worth growing these. And here's cabbage in the same family, and some other brassicas in the same family picked young, and some mustard greens on the left, and some more curly kale on the right in this half wine barrel, which is a great way to container garden. And then these tree collards, whether they're green or purple tree collards, they live year after year after year if you don't get too cold. And you can also restart them from cuttings, and they are a backbone to the greens of our garden that we can just pick every day, and we don't have to worry about going to the store. We don't have to worry about putting a mask on and getting an infection from somebody else at the store. We are just going out to our backyard, picking something healthy, and coming back inside. Though I do recommend wearing masks when you go to the store, but not necessary in your garden. And then some artichokes, and these are not watermelons, though our watermelons often aren't much bigger than this, but these are a type of cucumber. They're a cucamelon, and some green grapes. Almost finished with the colors of the rainbow, but all the anthocyanins in your blueberries and in your grapes. These are Zen grapes in our backyard, and we don't make wine from them, but we want all the resveratrol from them. And so if you don't eat them plain, put them through your juicer. And this makes the best grape juice that you will ever have if you pick it late in the season. We don't add a single ounce of sugar to them, though I suppose you could try putting dates in them if you pick them too early and they're not sweet enough. And this is, I look forward to this. I'm going to probably make some today because the grapes are ready. And big fan of this if you haven't tried it. Some purple figs, turnips, kohlrabi in the brassica family, purple tomatillos, purple basil, purple eggplants, and ending with this beautiful purple cauliflower. Okay, so we're done with the colors of the rainbow. We're going to move on to food variety. And it was the American Gut Project by a doctor in, I think, 2012, and Dr. Will Bolshewitz, the gut doc that everyone, I think, knows about, who wrote Fiber Fueled, is a big fan of this project because it said the number one predictor of a healthy gut microbiome is the variety of plants in your diet. And so this speaks to one of the benefits of growing your own food is that you can grow many types of the same sort of thing. So while you might have one type of kale at your store, you can grow 20 different kinds of kale if you would like to, some people do. And I should do a shout out to say that, you know, I'm telling you today about why you should garden, but I'm not really telling you how to garden, and go to the experts for that. And I would like to throw a big shout out to Christy Wilhelmi from Garden Nerd. And Garden Nerd has a great podcast and great website and some books on how to grow your own mini fruit garden. She's out in Southern California and will give you lots of great tips. I'm also a fan of Charles Dowding in the UK for a no-dig gardening method. And of course, the very lively John Kohler from Growing Your Greens, who I think has been a guest of Chef AJ before, and has more gardening videos than anyone else on YouTube. These are some great resources, as well as your own extension, university extension, master gardeners, etc., in your local community. So here is from top a Australian finger lime, which is the one that you cut open and squeeze out, sort of like citrus caviar. A Mexican key lime underneath that, cutie tangerine, bear's lime, a Meyer lemon, a Satsuma mandarin, and a navel orange. We picked these all on the same day or two from our garden in the late winter or early spring. And so you can have this sort of a variety from various types of foods. Here, a variety of squashes that you can grow, and a variety of tomatoes. And if you're going to just grow one thing and you're just starting off at the beginning, may I recommend tomatoes because of obviously the lycopene and in them, but they just taste better than anything that's been picked and shipped from Mexico or the other side of the United States from where you live. And you can just grow things that are these tomatoes of different colors and shapes that you will never see on the stores. Here's an example of rainbow chard with its variety of beautiful colors. And each one's going to have a slightly different, when you're talking about these varieties of fruits and veg, slightly different vitamin, mineral, phytochemical array. And amazingly enough, this was in Fiber Fueled by Dr. Bolshewitz. He was saying that even comparing a Gala apple to a Fuji apple, they will have their own slightly different microbiome that covers them, and we will get benefits from that as well. And so grow a variety is the summary point for that section. So we can't talk about all this growth without talking about drought. So here is Mr. Boo Boo's dive bombing my shot here of our rainwater. and catchment. And we have these 55-gallon or so upcycled containers that shipped olives from Greece or something like that and sold for $18 a pop at the local store, the local garden center, etc., where you can link them up and catch rainwater. And then here is one that was on, we got it luckily on sale, but it holds 530 gallons. And so we have something like over 1,000 gallons of rainwater catchment capacity on our little property. And it fills up in a couple of storms because of all of the water that comes off of your roof and can fill these up quite quickly. But other ways to make sure that you are minimizing the amount of water to grow all this healthy food for you is by using mulch and compost, which feeds the soil bacteria and allows everything to work better there. The worm composting is another way to do it as well. So let's talk a little bit about what you do when you get a surplus. And so this is a nectar plum, which is a nectarine plum hybrid. That is one of the most delicious fruits that we grow. And sometimes you just can't eat 30 nectar plums in a day. And so what can you do to process that so that you can have this really healthy food all year round? We, chop it up, and this is what it looks like on the inside. And you put it in some ice cube trays or on top of a cookie tray and put it in the freezer and then put it in a bag. And you can put these in your smoothies or in your desserts all year round. Here's some kale chips that you can do in a dehydrator. And here are these Meyer lemons that are sliced and dehydrated that you can then throw when the lemons aren't growing. You can throw in your beans or your soups when you're cooking them. Mimi does most of the canning, and here she is canning some tomatoes. I don't recommend taking the skin and the seeds out, which is so much time wasted. And we just do them pretty much either whole or cut in half. And here we are working with the cherry tomatoes, a different kind of blueberry cherry tomato, some sun golds, which are some of the sweetest cherry tomatoes that you can grow. And I think these are those yellow pear cherry tomatoes as well. And this is a reminder that you can do the same thing with herbs. I don't know if you've done this, Chef AJ, before, but this is just when you have excess basil, you can just add a little water and put it into an ice cube tray, and then throw that in your sauce or your pasta next time that you're heating it up. Or you can make the vegan pesto ahead of time and freeze that as well. And then you can, pour your plums that you've cooked down into a sauce and put it into a popsicle. And your daughter doesn't even need to know that it's really healthy for her and doesn't have any added sugars. But you can tell her if you would like to. All right. So we're going to move now on to the exercise or the motion, the movement benefits of gardening. And this is kind of what I think our house would look like if we didn't have a garden. We would have our daughter would be on the video games, and our dog and our cat would be semi-comatose on the rug. But we have these nudges in our lives that Dan Buettner and the Blue Zones Project talks about. These nudges that get us out of our armchair and gets us moving. On one hand, you don't need to do much. There was a study out of Australia that said just standing for 2 hours a day decrease mortality over the people who sat all day. And so we're not saying that you need to be a marathon runner. If you are, that's great, but just standing is good for your health. And it takes a lot of willpower to get out of bed at 6 a.m. and to go for a 5-mile run. It takes a lot less willpower to get out of bed so that you can go to the bathroom, because that's just kind of something you need to do. And a lot less willpower. And if your bathroom, by the way, is on the second floor and you're on the first, even better. But if it also takes a lot less willpower to get up and make dinner for your loved one, or for yourself. And so these are all just sort of natural ways to keep us moving. And the garden is totally a natural way to do that as well, because you plant your seeds, then you got to go outside and check to water them. And then you got to check to see if the caterpillars are eating your starts, like they probably are right now during this talk. And so after I finish the presentation, I'm going to go outside and see if those cabbage caterpillars are eating my Brussels sprout starts. And these are all little nudges that don't take a whole lot of willpower for a single act, but they all add up, and they're going to keep you moving. And so here I am taking these 5-gallon buckets of compost around, and just walking around with them is healthy. But if you get motivated and you want to do some curls in the middle of it all, you can do that too, but it's not necessary. But another way that I have it sort of built into my garden routine is that I use the same one of those upcycled barrels, and we put our food waste in it. And this way it keeps it away from rats and stuff. But I've drilled holes in it to try to keep the air flowing in it. But that doesn't work just by sitting there. So you actually have to pull it down and roll it around some, stick a shovel or something else in there, and try to keep it from getting anaerobic for the bacteria that love the oxygen free environment. Move it around, shake it up so that the compost is made in a healthy way. And then you have to do sort of a deadlift. And when this thing is almost full, you have to be careful so that you don't go to the emergency room with a pulled back afterwards. This is moving on to the benefits of vitamin D. So this is a sunny day in the summer with a beautiful Mexican sunflower over my shoulder. And it's a reminder that we need the sun, just like the plants do. And, I don't want you to sit in a tanning booth or sit out all day and increase your skin cancer risk, but 15 to 30 minutes of sun for fair-skinned individuals during this summer, and a little bit longer for darker-skinned individuals, and will get you all the vitamin D you need. During the winter, if you're not living close to the tropics, you'll probably need some supplemental vitamin D in your diet or in a pill. But during the most of the year, you can get it from the sun. And this sunflower loves it, and so do you. And if you're outside working in the garden, you can use the sun in something like this sun oven, which focuses all the sun rays into your it looks like I'm making a curry or a soup in there as well, and use the power of the sun for that. And then sometimes, we know sleep is an important part of lifestyle medicine, and sometimes you're just too pooped to go on, and you can pass out for a little bit in the garden. But if you see this, make sure that you check a pulse to make sure that they are doing okay and not overstraining from watering. Okay, so we're moving into what happens in the winter. You want to have these healthy fruit and veg during the winter as well as you can, if you can. Well, we talked about processing them, but there are other ways that you can protect them. This is where maybe I go a little overboard, but I really want to grow my own avocados, and it's a struggle here in Northern California. So you can see that they're covered with a frost blanket, and they have an umbrella over them, and they're incandescent Christmas lights around them. And all of that keeps them a couple of degrees warmer on this frosty winter night. So you can do tricks like that if you're a little crazy like me. But other things, like here's some dino kale and purple collards. These things take frosts and will be fine. You can still harvest them in a lot of places where it doesn't get too cold. All right. One of the pillars of lifestyle medicine is stress management, relaxation. And we know that time out in nature is good for us. I mean, there's studies where just looking at green lights mimics being out in nature and can be beneficial for us. And there are studies looking at associations with gardening and improved mental health, decreased risk for anxiety and depression. I think part of that is just looking at beautiful scenes like this in the garden. And these are some naked lilies. And I will go through a bunch of photos just real quick to show some of the beautiful flowers that grow in our garden that really brighten up our time, and not only feel good for us to look at, but are very attractive for our pollinators that we'll talk about. Roses and irises and okra flowers, for example, are gorgeous as well. Some more irises, and when the peach blossoms open up in the spring, in the winter, that you have these healthy peaches coming up later in the year. That there's rebirth, and that the winter's over, and that spring is here again, and it's good for your mood to see this. Here's one of our peach trees looking down at some succulents, and that nectar plum that I mentioned earlier. This is what it looks like in February, and this really gets the heart singing when you look at it. Some lilac, which smells great, and various other fruit and veg that, when the sun is just right, you look at it and you say, this is just absolutely artwork. water lily from a discarded bathtub that was in our yard when we bought it, and other flowers like that. Mushrooms are a sign of healthy growth in your soil. So when you see these beautiful mushrooms, don't eat them because they're probably not good for you, but they are beautiful to look at. Okay. So maybe I've convinced you to grow a little bit of your own for all the benefits to health from with the food that you eat and the movement and the vitamin D and the stress reduction. And maybe you want to be so healthy that you never have to see any of us plant-based doctors again, but you're not gardening yet, and you want to know how to do it. So one way is to garden on top of your driveway, like we did here. I bought a bunch of pots. You can also do terracotta, but I chose plastic in this case. But then I painted them to make them look a little prettier and planted them, and you can grow all sorts of things in them. We used this space that was just side driveway to build a raised bed, which has got those scarlet runner beans growing up the back trellis there, amongst other things. Or you can rent a saw and cut a hole in your driveway and grow some citrus that way. And, it looks pretty messy right there. It starts to look a little bit better as some things start to grow in it. And then you go from there to maybe 4 or 5 years later, and you've got the best type of vitamin C for December, January, in February, or January, February, March, something like that, depending on where you live. Here's me fighting against nature by planting in a Mexicola Grande avocado. And then about 3 years later, this is what it looks like. Sweet potatoes are also great to be grown in containers. Here's an organic sweet potato from the store, cut in half, sitting in some water. Some weeks later, it starts to give you bigger sprouts and root. And then you can plant that into buckets, for example, with holes in the bottom, and they'll give you pretty flowers and pretty sweet tasting sweet potatoes. And then this is a sweet potato that was a monstrosity that looks like, something out of a horror movie or science fiction movie. And it tasted delicious. It was about the size of a toddler, and it would have been thrown out. It never would have been sent to the stores, right? But this is another example of how growing your own is good for the environment as well. We can't be healthy without a healthy environment, because this isn't going to be wasted. You're going to eat this. And a tip of the hat to Dr. McDougall and Chef AJ and all the McDougallers out there. Here are some potatoes. Which I know there's been some interesting discussion very recently, again from Dr. McDougall, in defense of the potato. And they are delicious, and if you're preparing them in a good way and not deep frying them, they're going to be good for you. And you can buy types that you won't see on your grocery stores, and that are just delicious. Here's some of the purple ones, etc. Okay, so say I don't want to do any of that crazy stuff, but I do want to grow something, and I don't have any room. I'm in an apartment, so grow some broccoli sprouts. And there's this great method on growing broccoli sprouts. And remember, these brassicas are full of all these healthy anti-cancer chemicals that you just get. This is a little bonsai pot, and you soak some broccoli seeds or radish seeds or sunflower seeds, etc. You soak them overnight, and then you put them on top of the soil, and you cover them with some wet paper towels. And then you put them in a completely dark place for about 4 days. And then you take them out, and they look pale and leggy, and oh, that doesn't look so healthy. But you put them on the windowsill, and 2 days later, you have something that looks like this. And you can chop those up and put them in a salad, put them on top of your stir fry, etc. And this is a great way to get lots of nutrients. You can do this 12 months out of the year, no matter where you live. Here I'm doing it with some black lentils as well. And so beautiful way to get some healthy nutrients in your body. The other way that you can do this in small spaces is growing your herbs. Here's some rosemary, oregano, and winter savory. You can do these things in a really sunny windowsill, or grow them in a pot outside, and during the winter bring them in as well. Okay, So we're getting close to the end, but this is the exotics section. So, do not try this at home if you're just starting for the most part. But I like a challenge, and I like doing things that are not just, say, tomatoes and cucumbers. And so this is a mountain papaya or a babaco that you can grow in a pot, and you slice it open, and it tastes like cotton candy in the middle. And it's got a different set of nutrients for you, and it's going to be healthy for you as well. And here's a curry bush. It's so hard to get fresh curry leaves for your curries. You can just grow it in a pot. Here's that passion fruit that is easy to do in Southern California, not easy to do in a lot of other places. So I'm growing it under the eave of the roof. Here's a pawpaw tree that is all the rave in the the Midwest and the far Northeast, but not so much out here. A spiny melon from South Africa that was delicious and beautiful. Here's a mango, a Pickering mango. If you guys want to try growing a mango in a pot, I suggest getting it from there. Pickering mango. And then here is a tree tomato or a tamarillo. A banana that might never give me bananas, but we'll try. Here's a guava, a dragon fruit, a macadamia tree, some moringa, and even a cacao plant to see if we can make our own chocolate, or at least have some fresh cacao fruit. And so these are all crazy things that may or may not benefit us, but it's a part of the purpose that I have, which is trying to grow as much of my own stuff as possible. Okay, and so we can't talk about being healthy and having healthy bodies without talking about a healthy planet. And I know this has been a move that Dr. John McDougall is emphasizing now more, and we just can't ignore it. There's every day on the news, there's something about climate change, and there's every week you see something about the decline of our pollinators. And so if we're going to have healthy bodies and healthy food sources, we have to have a healthy pollinator population. So a very popular pollinator are these honeybees that are on this sunflower, on this squash flower. This is a wildflower called Lacey Facilia, or blue or purple tansy, and they just wiggle around in there, and they love it. And sometimes they swarm. Our neighbor's beehive split off when it was big enough and swarmed into our fence. So this is a little willow fence we built. And you can see that they are not protected from the elements there. They will die there, or they will try to go somewhere else. And if they don't find a log, the queen, which is somewhere deep in there, will die, and that colony will be lost. And so here they are, a different swarm in our peach tree. And so you can be brave, like my wife, who dons her beekeeper suit and gently uses her gloved hands to put them in a bee transport box that then she can turn into the bee society of our county, so that they can be appropriately housed and maintained for the benefit of all. Mimi also maintains 2 hives, and it is predominantly for the benefit of our garden, our neighbors' gardens, the pollinators in general. We get a little bit of honey from it, but that's not really the main focus. And we can't be spraying insecticides onto our plants and expect to be healthy as well. It hurts the pollinators and it hurts us. And, Michael Greger on Nutrition Facts has a nice summary on, conventional fruit and veg versus organic fruit and veg. And we know that the pesticides harm the people that are working in the farms and those who live close to the farms. But we also know that eating a conventionally grown pepper is better than eating an organic Oreo, that we need to be eating as many fruits and vegetables as possible. And so we try to have the best of both worlds and grow as organically as possible. And these are our favorite aphid eaters, which is a ladybug larva going to town and becomes a ladybug that eats the aphids as well, but not as much as the larva did. Here's a praying mantis that gets all sorts of garden bugs for us. And then there's other just beautiful insects that bless us with their appearance in the garden. And so no talk on growing your own food is complete without the obligatory photos of food that you have made based on the things that you have grown. I like how the chef is smiling there in the background. And so here are some soups and sauteed veggies and a salad, for example, that you'd never find in the store, covered with nasturtium flowers and borage flowers and some sort of brassica flowers as well on top of mixed greens. And a ratatouille put in the oven, some stir fry, and then my favorite of making your own pizza, vegan pizzas with all the fruits of your labor from your garden. Okay, so the last section, I really have to say that the most important thing out of our garden of growing our own stuff, and what the most important thing in my garden is my family and particularly our future generations. And here's Mimi. And you can see inside of her, our daughter, Camille, has been gardening since she was a fetus. And from there on to being a baby, getting all sorts of things in her mouth in the garden, and picking things and helping out. She realizes that fruit doesn't just appear magically in the grocery stores. She understands that it takes work, that it takes commitment and money, and we need to support our farmers, but that we can also do it ourselves. And as she grows up, you see her playing with the fruits of our labor, and playing hide and seek with the giant chard, or making fairy wings out of the charred leaves, and helping us with our fava bean processing and our sunflower seed collecting, and just seeing that nature is all around us and that we have to be careful and take care of the insects and animals that visit our garden. And she also knows that the ripest, most tasty fruit is that you pick right in your garden and eat it before you even make it back inside the house. And that it's important to help out in the family and bring the fruits inside. And, sometimes she's not totally convinced that she needs to be outside in the garden. And but it's a nudge to get her out, to be part of the family. And I end with this because this was a shot from last year from our garden, and you can see that you can hardly see anything, and that's because this is the smoke from the California wildfires, and we cannot ignore what's happening to our planet. And I don't think by me growing a garden I'm going to reverse climate change, and I don't think by me and our neighbors growing a garden it's going to reverse climate change. But if enough of us do this, if enough of us continue to eat a plant-based diet and to live by treading lightly on this planet, we have our best chance, in addition to pressuring our politicians, that we can treat our planet well, and that she will be patient with us and treat us well in return. And my hope is that we see a lot less of this and a lot more of this in the future. Thank you, Chef AJ.
Oh my God. No, thank you, Dr. Pierce. This was so inspiring. Does it matter where you live though? Like, I live in the desert and it's like 120. Can I still grow my own food with a very tiny yard?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And if you, a great person, this John Kohler from Growing Your Greens, who used to live in my neck of the woods in Northern California, moved out to
I think it was
Nevada.
Las Vegas.
Yeah, Vegas area. And so he, in addition to showing other people's yards around the world, he also shows his own stuff and shows people how to use shade cloth during the summer, how to position your plants so that they get maybe more morning sun than afternoon sun. And then, of course, growing indoors as well, like the sprouts and stuff like that. But yeah, you can grow something anywhere, including Alaska, including Siberia, and including, Palm Springs.
Wow, that is so cool. There was a question when you showed the mushrooms. When you have portobello mushrooms, are we supposed to scrape the gills off or can you eat them?
So I would start by saying I'm not a mushroom expert, but we never scrape the gills off. And the way we treat most of the mushrooms is the stems tend to be, depending on when you pick them, the stems tend to be tougher. And so we might chop up some of the stem into what we're cooking, but then the tougher parts of the stems we will put in the freezer bag until we have enough of odds and ends that we will make our own veggie stock out of. But as far as the gills go, we incorporate those. And I'd be interested to know if there's some reason not to, but as far as I know, that's okay.
Right. So do you grow purslane?
Yes, actually, purslane grows itself without my help because it's just seeds so readily that I'm kind of pulling it out more than trying to actually purposely cook it or grow it and bring it into the kitchen. But it's
It's
nice and
really high.
tasty.
I was told that it's the highest source, the highest the vegetable source of omega-3 fatty acids, like for people that don't want to eat nuts and seeds.
Oh, that's cool. I'd be excited to look that up because I will treat my purslane better if now that I know better.
It's really good because I don't eat nuts and seeds, so I always make sure to eat purslane. And
Cool.
they have it a lot in Mexico. They call it vertulago, and you can get it at
Uh-huh.
the ethnic markets as vertulago. And so that would be something I'd really be interested in growing.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it will. You just, in my experience here, is it will put little flowers and then these seed pods, and the seeds are about maybe they look a little bit like chia seeds, but even smaller. And if you let those go all over the place, it will continue to self seed itself year after year.
Yeah, it looked like you had a couple of nice dogs.
Yeah, we have Lilu, who was just at my feet and trying to distract me from the talk, but she is a rescue. Our neighbors are amazing. They have compassion without borders. They are a vet and husband-wife team that rescue dogs from the Central Valley and from northern Mexico. And Lilu had a broken leg, and no one wanted her, and they were going to euthanize her, but they fixed her leg, and we adopted her, and she's one of the family.
Those sound like great guests for this show. I love that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Maybe you can
They would
introduce
be
me. That's
great
the kind of
guests.
I'm always doesn't have to be just vegan. I'm interested in people that are doing great things, and rescuing animals is great. Before I forget, Becky Howe, thank you so much for the super chat donation. My chat goes really fast, and the comments only stay a certain amount of time. But I did see a really nice comment on plant-based telehealth saying that they solved the person's problem. It was Dr. Scheuer, who's actually going to be on Friday. So just don't forget, he's not just a gardener, he's a doctor too, and you can make an appointment with him. May I ask you one somewhat medical question? I mean, I know you can't treat the people, but it was right at the beginning. JL, who's a regular viewer, we appreciate her tuning in every day. Her daughter's 31 weeks pregnant, and she's leaking. Not sure what she's leaking because the chat went away, but I'm guessing she was wondering to know if that's something to worry about.
Right. So yes, I still work on labor and delivery and have the honor, the pleasure of being able to teach young docs on labor and delivery every week, and we're delivering babies. And that is a common concern. A woman comes in and they say, I've noticed that I'm leaking something, and it's our job to help her find out, is this just having a bit of a overactive bladder because of the pressure of the baby, and you coughed or sneezed and this is urine, versus is this normal discharge from being pregnant, or is your bag of water broken and this is amniotic fluid, and that's typically a reason to be admitted to the hospital. And if you're term, it's time to have your baby. If you're preterm, we do all sorts of things. Significantly preterm, we do all sorts of things to try to keep you healthy until your baby is mature enough to be delivered.
Right. Thank you so much.
Sure.
You mentioned amaranth, and amaranth, I thought it was a grain. You grow it. Like, I'm confused.
Yeah. So, these grains are quite beautiful often, as well as good for us, powerhouses of nutrients. And so the ones that we try to grow, both quinoa, which I know is from the Andes and used to be eaten by the Andean warriors apparently before going into battle, and amaranth, which I wouldn't be surprised if it's also from South America, but I can't say for sure, can be grown in your garden. You can eat the leaves, particularly when they're young, but amaranth is the same leaf that's going into callaloo recipes, for example, and I guess callaloo, I think, is a type of amaranth. And so you can grow them just because they're beautiful. The amaranth makes these big, oftentimes purple spires of flowers. B, you can grow them for the leaves. And when things are too hot in the summer, maybe to grow your chard or kale, you can harvest these leaves and cook them, or you can wait for those flowers to dry and just try to saute those up and eat them. But I don't go through the process of winnowing them and all this kind of stuff to make them look like you would when you get a bag of amaranth from the store.
Yeah, I don't think I've even had amaranth. I love when you showed that leaf of chard because I think rainbow chard of all the greens, I think it's my favorite, and especially people that are green resistant. Chard is so neutral. It's not bitter like some of the others. And Becky says, "Well, what do you do with Swiss chard or spinach?" I saute it with onions. I
Yeah.
love it that way.
Yeah, I think all these greens, chard being one that I use in this manner, is um, you can cut the whole thing, stem and leaf, all together, and saute them, put them in a soup, or just put them on top of whatever your meal is. So we do a lots of, a legume and a grain, and some cooked veggies, and then trying to put fresh greens on top. You can certainly do that with chard. Sometimes the toughest part of the stem I'll cut up and throw to the house bunny that we've got, so that makes good bunny food. But some people prefer to cut the whole stem out, and just eat the leaves. It's all edible. It's all great. You don't want to eat 5 cups of it a day every day because of the oxalate component theoretically, but it is perfectly healthy to eat every day, just not you know 3-5 cups of it, and we love it. It's self seeds, and so we never plant chard anymore because we just let it look a little bit messy, throw seeds, it throws its own seeds around, and then a couple months later we have a new chard plant growing.
Wow, that is so cool. That is, this was just so fun to watch. You kind of inspired me to try to grow some of my own food because I just hate that things come in bags, but like you can't just take it in your hand in the store.
Yeah, yeah, that is one of the big benefits, I think, is just all these tiny little things. You're like, it's just one single use bag, but all that adds up, and to be able to avoid that, to be able to not have it shipped from out of state and out of country and out of our own country, all this kind of stuff is just, it all adds up. Yeah.
I know, gosh, I always end up feeling so guilty. Somebody's suggesting chard for wraps. You could use a large
Oh.
chard leaf just like you would a collard to make wraps. Sure.
Yeah, they're not quite as tough as like a collard, but definitely can use it. I mean, they're as tough as lettuce, for example, and if you're making lettuce wraps, and we've not done that, so we'll have to give it a try.
Oh, okay. So here's a fun question from Victoria. What is your favorite meal?
Oh, I love these. Uh, okay, so it, we go between, I would say I go between two, if I am allowed that luxury to say, but I love cooking vegan Indian food. And so having a grain like a brown rice and a lentil veg curry on top, that would be something I could eat, most every day. But then the other side, I'm half Hispanic Latino on my mom's side, Mexican descent, and so you just can't go wrong with beans and rice. And so I will do either pinto beans or black beans or a mix of other beans. And it's important for us to have beans in our fridge, pretty much beans or lentils in our fridge, cooked and ready to go. But so just fresh pot of beans with a grain, chopped up greens from the garden. If it's the right season, some fresh tomatoes on the side. And, it's store bought right now, but some sliced avocado. And someday, if we're lucky, our own avocados from our own tree. I think that's probably my perfect meal with
Wow.
some tortillas on the side.
Nice. I saw I love those purple potatoes you had.
Yeah, those are great. And whether they're the Irish potato or the sweet potato, all of those are just super great for healthy starches. And I heard, I think John Jevons, who is a pretty well-known California grower, who says, if you wanted to grow all your food or almost all your food, which we don't yet, but and maybe never will, but if you wanted to grow enough food for you to live off of and not have to go to the store, you need a source of starches of a healthy grain or other starch likewise. And so it takes a lot of space, like we said, to grow your own oats and wheat. But I think potatoes and sweet potatoes would be what you could survive on if you put enough of that in your garden. So, we saw it on The Martian when he grew his own potatoes, and not quite the same way that we grow our potatoes, but you use that as a calorie source that will help keep you full, like Dr. Greger talks about, like Dr. McDougall talks about a lot. It fills you up. And so if you wanted to be self-sufficient when the zombie apocalypse comes, make sure that you're growing lots of potatoes and or sweet potatoes, and that will keep you full, in addition to the nutrients that you can get from your greens, etc.
If you ever had the Hawaiian sweet potatoes, can you grow something like that in the United States?
Yeah, so it's sweet potatoes are fascinating. There's a place where you can get little sweet potato starts that I'm blanking on right now. The name of the place somewhere up in, I want to say Idaho, maybe. But you can buy online different kinds of sweet potatoes, and you look at the selection, and there are so many different kinds of sweet potatoes. We are used to what we see at the store, and we're like, oh, look, there's a white sweet potato, there's a Japanese sweet potato, there's a Hawaiian sweet potato, and there's a orange sweet potato that sometimes people call yams. But when you look on buying from a grower, there are just tons and tons of different varieties. And so I bring that up to say some of them are good in short growing seasons, where you have a relatively short time between the last frost in the spring and the first frost in the fall. And some do better in long growing seasons. And my suggestion is just to experiment. Get a organic one from the store. Start it like I mentioned, and try various types. Try a Hawaiian one, try the different colors, and try to grow them, and give it as much time as you can in the ground before you harvest it. We usually harvest it right when the first frosts are coming, and see if it's formed a tuber. And I've grown some purple ones. I think the Hawaiian one you're talking about is a purple fleshed one, right?
It's actually the one I'm talking about, like the ones that Okinawans eat. They're actually beige on the outside, but very deep purple on the inside.
Yes. Yeah. So try growing those. I've grown the purple inside, purple outside ones. And the one time I tried that, they didn't beef up. That's a bad phrase. They didn't bulk up as much as the white or the orange ones that I grew that year, but it might have just been that one varietal. And so try again. And remember, like I said, the best gardeners are the ones that have made the most mistakes. And because it's all just experimentation.
Great. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Chef AJ. Thank you for allowing me to talk both about health, individual health and planetary health, and being able to grow fruit and vegetable. I don't think I could ask for any kind of a better chat to have with you. So thank you so much.
Great. I think, though, since this is Plant-Based Telehealth Week, I'd like to ask you, what do you like best about being able to do telehealth with plant-based telehealth?
Well, it's a great group of people. You can have a easy day at work, but you don't get along with your co-workers, and that makes for a pretty horrible working situation. Or you can have a hard day at work and you love your co-workers, and that makes it all pretty doable. And I know we've got a good group of people, like Nikki and Dr. K were saying this week already. We can bounce things off of each other, and we have a good group to work with, but we're doing, I think, really important work. Because I can write prescription antibiotics for bladder infections and for colds and for sore throats, and all of that is very important to take care of these acute issues. But I don't know right now if there's something better that I can do as a doctor than to help people make the switch to a predominantly plant-based diet, and to support those people that have made the switch and want to use food and movement and lifestyle in general to stay healthy. And I don't think there's anything more as far as impact goes that I can do than to do this kind of medicine and teach the young doctors that are coming up this kind of medicine. So it's a real honor to be able to have this opportunity.
Great. And people are thanking you, like Jerry. Angela says this is outstanding. And other people want to know, are you on Instagram? Is there a way to follow your garden?
Oh, thank you very much for those kind words. I really appreciate it. I have a new Instagram account that I started since being with Plant-Based Telehealth. I believe it's Dr. Jeff Pierce. I'm Jeffrey M. Pierce MD on Facebook.
I found it and I'm
yeah,
going to link to it.
yeah.
Great. Nice. Well, thank you. You are just a plethora of information, both medical and botanical.
Thank you, Chef.
Okay, take care. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow when we continue with Plant-Based Telehealth Week with another fabulous doctor named Chris Miller, who actually healed herself of autoimmune disease. That's so cool that the physician healed herself.
Totally.
Take care, Dr.